And just want to, of course, as it's common, introduce our wonderful fellows. Introduce yourself.
I'm Dale Zaria. I'm on the Ward 6 NPA steering committee.
I'm Will Sporny. I am also with the Ward 6 NPA steering committee.
Nina Lapone, I'm with the Ward 6 steering committee.
And I'm Rabia Von Herman. I'm a member of the steering committee as well. I believe Nancy's not here.
Right.
She online.
Nope, she couldn't make it tonight.
Okay. So she couldn't make it, but I'm glad that she's with us. That being said, our next item is any announcement. Anybody who has an announcement, this is your chance to share with us if you like. Go ahead, come forward, share with us your name and the announcement.
My name's Bob Leidy. I'm part of Branch Out Burlington. And I think we were here at talking about excessive rain issues a couple of months ago, and now not so much. But our trees are dying, so if you have a chance to water them, that would help. Branch Out Burlington supplies like 400 trees that get planted each year by the city. We work in conjunction with the city, and so we bought you'll see these green bags that people fill to keep some of our young trees alive, but a lot of the other ones are dying. And, you've all seen the ash trees getting taken out. If you have any questions about that, I can help with that. But we have about 700 ash trees in the city that are being removed because they're going to die. And when they die from the top and they fall down on the sidewalk, which is not a great thing. So the other thing that we're seeing is a lot of trees are dying in the greenways because of weed whackers and excessive mowing or knocking out all the poor bark on the trees. So, anything you can do to help out our trees would be appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of the committee, or rather the members of the public, want to make an announcement? We're going to move on to public forum. Anybody who wants to speak? I'm guessing nobody's online at this point. All right, we're going to move on to the next item. We have our district councilor, Councilor Buddy Singh, who is here. We're very privileged to have you. I believe you're going to be talking about the homelessness, concerns about homelessness. So take it away.
Thank you, Romeo, by the way, for inviting me to be part of the Ward 6 MPA. I actually asked Sarah Russell and she'll come. She is speak after I give a couple updates. She's actually in the mayor's office now and is the lead on the homelessness crisis that in Burlington in our response as a city. I just want to give a couple council updates. I don't know if people have been, it's been summer, but this last council meeting, we had a bunch of important things that kind of went through. First, I'd like to say thank you to the BPD union and the council and the administration. We are able to ratify their new collective bargaining agreement. Which we really hope is going to be a great model for the city moving forward. There's some provisions in there that's going to help us hopefully be able to recruit some lateral hires, enabling experienced officers to buy into the pension system. So hopefully it makes it more attractive for us to get not officers that necessarily have to go to the academy and then, kind of apprentice on the force. Hopefully that'll help us get some lateral hires to the BPD so we can get the staffing up to the levels that we're hoping for. So that was a really great lead by the administration and the council, was there at the end to help ratify it. But I think that was a very important step in moving the city forward. We also, at the last council meeting, I don't know if people were familiar with City Circle, was a resolution that was passed. So that will enable us to, as a city through, our own community justice center to help adjudicate certain, individuals that have, many encounters with people in public safety, and it'll enable for them to have some sort of restorative justice outside of the regular criminal justice system. So hopefully that can help with levels of accountability in the city. So hopefully it's filling a gap that isn't necessarily happening right now with regards to repeat offenders and quality of life crimes here in Burlington. And we're hoping that that can help move the needle. So I thought that was a great initiative by the administration to move that forward. We also had a resolution with regards to City Hall Park about enforcing ordinances, and trying to keep, downtown safer for all users of City Hall Park, so the whole public can enjoy the amenities there. That was another thing that had passed recently on the council. This coming Monday, we're going to take up a couple resolutions, and one of them has to do with cleanup of needles in the city through, we're going to provide some council funds to help that initiative. There's a lot of community members that are taking part each week to help clean up downtown. I've definitely noticed a difference in what's going on downtown with regards to that, and being able to clean those up and keep it safe for everybody to enjoy, and go along with the administration's moves on harm reduction with regards to that crisis. If there's any questions about any council business, I'd be happy to answer that. But as far as, the city's response to the ongoing homelessness crisis, Sarah's here to speak on that. I do want to say in that small resolution, there were some resolve clauses about the administration and the council doing our best to work with state leaders and the governor to get necessary resources so we can help move this crisis to a better place, being that we have so many of our homeless neighbors here in Burlington. So I think that's really important that was kind of enshrined in that resolution, that we want to work more with our state leaders to kind of do something on that front. So Burlington isn't left, and the Burlington taxpayers aren't left to shoulder the burden of this crisis that finds it on our doorstep each summer and through the winter months. So from there, I wanted to introduce Sarah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Before we
Yeah.
move on,
I
Council.
have questions about things other than the homeless
Yeah.
issue. So in terms of police hiring and size of police force, can you shed any light on what's going on between the mayor and the governor? About whether the state offered to send police forces, whether we want them,
there was a clarification I think that went out from the mayor's office today. There wasn't
clarifying though.
So from what I understand, and from what I understand is, there wasn't a specific offer from the governor. He used that as an example, that in the past that he had had state troopers here in Burlington when we were very low on headcount in the BPD, and he was, from what I understand, he was offering that as an example as the way he could support Burlington. From my understanding is that Chief Burke and the mayor had spoken, and that's not the level of support they're looking for at the moment. I don't know whether that will change going forward, or if other things come up, whether that'll be revisited. But from what I understand, it wasn't like a definitive offer. Like, I'm providing you state troopers to be in Burlington, and the mayor, it wasn't offered, and the mayor didn't refuse that offer. So I think it was kind of a back and forth in the public, and then it might have been misconstrued, I think, by the public at large of what happened there. So
That helps.
I hope
Thank
that's
you.
a little more clarifying on that issue.
Counselor. Any additional
Yeah.
question from the counselor?
Sure.
On that same topic, I think you're doing all wonderful things relative to police hiring but long-term, the people that go to the Vermont Police Academy don't want to come to Burlington. And Champlain College used to teach our policemen. They would love to do it again. I talked to freshmen at Champlain College that are joint criminal justice, social justice majors. They're the kind of people we need long-term to be our police.
Yeah.
But our police require the testing be done at the police academy. Our fire department has a local testing for firemen. Our police need to have a local testing. They need to have some path where people can be educated and become policemen in Burlington. And Champlain College is offering a path, but our police union is refusing that by not having a local test.
I appreciate that. You know, I would encourage you also to, last public safety meeting was last Thursday, and Chief Burke did talk about a lot of his recruitment efforts. You know, your point is well taken. I will take that back and try to find out why that isn't happening locally. He was talking about the recruitment, about outreach at certain college fairs in the region where we do find a lot of the officers that have come to Vermont in the past, and how they're at those job fairs doing those campus visits, very targeted.
And that's all great.
Yeah. So
I'm just talking long-term. We
Yes.
should have a long-term plan
Yes.
where we train our own police.
yeah, and that's a great
Young
point.
people, and then they're the ones patrolling Church Street. They're
Yep.
learning how to do it, becoming from our community.
Mhm. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions for the counselor before we move on to Sarah?
I have a quick question. I'm Wendy Hacken. I live up on Winooski. So two things. One, what is the best way to just kind of identify if homeless people are in the streets and they, in some place you think that they shouldn't be? That's my first question. And then the second thing is, I think there are some efforts that are being asked to relocate these individuals, and I was just curious to where that was or is there a specific direction at this moment? We're kind of all dancing around. Yeah, we need to monitor this better, but
I'll leave that, I guess, to Sarah as far as she's more on the ground with respect to that. But I would say is, there are with respect to like the urban reserve and things like that, there are talks, on the public safety committee about revisiting, where we would want people to be able to camp, as far as how close it is to the recreational facilities and neighbors and visitors alike, and how we can better enforce that and be able to make sure that people are able to use the bike path.
I mean, it's kind of a transition that, obviously you can't magically just say, "Whew," the problem is is gone. People are going to still need a place to reside. And so, it's the question was there kind of a direction to where that might be or being proposed? So that's kind of the general question.
I can certainly speak to our sheltering on public lands policy if that would be helpful.
Sarah, you can just go ahead and start as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I did have some data slides that I was going to share, but for some reason I'm totally not able to connect to your Zoom link. So I'll make sure to send those to someone here and they can share them with you all. So I'm sorry you can't see them. I wasn't planning to start with sheltering on public lands policy, but I'm more than happy to do so. So we, in response to an ACLU settlement a few years ago, the city had to develop a sheltering on public lands policy that covers both our enumerated parks and it covers other city property. In our enumerated parks, we have a no camping ordinance that is enforced. What that means is that if a tent or if a tent pops up in a city park, we respond to that tent as soon as we see it. And the tent is noticed for removal and needs to be taken down within a realistic time frame. Most of the time it's by the end of the day or something like that, or within 6 hours or, whatever. If there is a tent on our public lands that are not listed in our enumerated parks, we have a different process that we have to follow, and that's dictated by this ACLU settlement. And what that entails is that we can't immediately go for removal of a camp that is set up on city land. We need to go through an assessment and noticing process. And there is some discretion that the administration has around enforcement or length of time someone is given to move along. So we've decided in years past, the prior administration took a stance that they didn't want camping anywhere in the city. And I think I understand why that was the stance. We also had a lot less people outside in the past than we do now. But I can also say from a staff impact standpoint, it was like, I think you hear people, and I feel like it's maybe a little disrespectful language, but it's accurate, is the whack-a-mole, right? It's like, when you remove somebody from one spot, they pop up another spot, you're moving from another spot, they pop up another spot. And that becomes so taxing on staff, both from like a time perspective, but also from a morale perspective. Like it feels crummy to follow around the same people and tell them that they can't be there. And also it creates tension and conflict with people who have nowhere to go. So that's kind of been the rub in the past. Last year, with a new administration, but I actually made the recommendation. So I'm happy that it was implemented, is that we focus on enforcement of the ordinance to make sure that we're in compliance with that in our parks, in our enumerated parks. And we exercise tolerance and patience in city land where we do have the ability to have more discretion. Just to be clear, we also have that there's a noticing period. A written notice needs to be placed in order for us to remove a camp on public land. There's an approval process, needs to be approved by our city attorney. And we also need to store belongings for a minimum of 30 days. We need to provide reasonable accommodation. There's a whole bunch of other sort of protections that go into place. So for the last 2 years, as I said, we've been focusing on enforcement of the ordinance in our parks, and then exercising that tolerance in other areas. And that has been with the response from frontline staff, both in our police department, our public works department, who manages the city-owned land that is not a park, and the Parks and Rec department. That has been like, we don't see camps, we don't see tents in our parks. We don't receive complaints of the public that like, oh, there's 5 tents set up in, Oak Ledge, or, oh, there's, people camping down at North Beach. Or when we do get a response, we're able to, or when we get a notification, we're able to target our response really quickly. So the number of concerns, or like see, click, fix or something where it was like skyrocketing, the year before last, is now like almost non-existent. So we still have a tool in place to remove folks from public land, and we do exercise that when we need to. But this approach to enforcement of the ordinance, utilizing this policy, has been wildly successful, I think, for a lot of reasons. Yeah.
Thanks, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah.
Sure.
Any questions? Well, I actually have one. You did mention that, people pop up different spots when you move them. What I'm wondering is that in light of that, what are the options that are provided when they move from spot to spot?
Well, when someone is removed, we as city staff are not directing people to go to a certain location. I think that there's some like miscommunication, and we've kind of had to nuance that a little bit, because we're not saying like, oh, go put your tent up down at Urban Reserve or city. That is not messaging that city staff is telling people. I think that more we're enforcing where people can't be, and so naturally they migrate to places where they see other campers or they, hear from other people that they can be there. In the urban reserve specifically, we have a draft, an agreement with Vermont Housing Conservation Board. And we're working on finalizing the conservation map in the urban reserve right now that dictates conserved land. So there's a certain number of acres that must be conserved land, and we are tracking where there. I know nothing about this, but whoever spoke to the trees, you probably know more, and I sound silly, but there is a specific protected species of plants in the urban reserve. And so we have those marked, and then we have these conservation areas that we're working on finalizing. It's been a process because the map it looks like my 14-year-old drew it with his left hand, and it's not been updated since 1992 or 3 or something. So we've been doing some mapping with our GIS folks around overlaying that on so that we can actually mark out where these conserved areas are and make sure that those areas remain protected. Two of the things that we have been working really closely on is trying to maintain, actually we're just starting to implement this and hope to have it fully in place by the end of the month, which may be ambitious, but to maintain a 100-foot buffer along the shoreline and to maintain a 25-foot buffer on either side of the bike path. We've opted to prioritize and first start with maintaining that 100-foot shoreline buffer because that aligns with our conservation efforts. And that's really mandated. The 25-foot buffer along the bike path is something that it's been sort of like an operating procedure, which is still important, but we need to work on one thing that's manageable at a time.
Well, not to suck up the oxygen. What I was trying to ask was, I know this has been an ongoing situation here.
Yeah.
In the city, and this is not unique to Burlington
Mhm.
per se. I'm trying to find out, of course, the pop-up situation is ongoing, but, temporary to permanent resolution, as it were, like when you tell somebody to, within a day, get rid of your tent, but there's no solution, the person has to set up somewhere else within the city or within the city limit, right? So is there a specific guidelines to say, hey, hotels are not available anymore from what I can tell? Is there something that the city can tell them, hey, go this way, try to find a temporary spot where you can stay? I know there's some stuff that was in the works that's no longer in the works anymore. Do you understand?
I don't know.
In terms of where they were supposed to stay,
Oh.
that was.
Well,
Yeah.
that wasn't anything to do with tenting. I think that we always provide folks with resource lists and directions to, where they can get basic needs met, we also, the preference is to send an outreach team from one of our community partners over city staff. So that way we're utilizing resources and to see what kinds of needs the person might have that could be met by our I think we are always trying to do that engagement with people. That's always the very first thing that we do whenever we see a tent anywhere. So we also, I'd love to talk about some of the more system level things that we're doing too around that. So we meet, I run a work group that meets once a week, every single week, for the entire summer. And, that
Around 9 a.m. you guys meet?
we meet,
There's an email that I sent to a group Gmail.
I think that's for the Homeless Alliance. No,
Okay.
this is an internal city work group that meets, it's cross-divisional, so it includes staff from multiple different departments. And we work through, we conduct a full site review, right? So we start with location, what are the issues at that location, and what is the action? In some cases, that action is going to be, we're going to continue to monitor it. In other cases, it's going to be, we're going to begin the notice period. In another case, it might be connection to something. So we meet and then use that as a tracker for the whole for all of the warmer months. In the meantime, we also know that this policy that was developed years ago is out of date with our current practice. So when it was developed, we didn't have the community support liaison team at the CSLs at the police department. We didn't have the park rangers. They weren't there yet. So we know there are updates that need to happen to this policy, but we're not able to endeavor on those updates while we have such an active camping situation. So on the side, we track themes that we know as we move through the summer, like, oh, this is something we need to check in the policy about in the fall, in the off season. So we meet once a week, we pull in different, departments. We actually had a great, meeting. I love the cross-divisional, collaboration that happens. There was a private owner reached out to us about a camp that was impacting their property, that was on city property. And so we worked to, with that private business owner the camp was removed on Tuesday. In the meantime, Burlington Electric Department said, there's an encampment on this private property that's really impacting like our parking lot and, traffic through our parking lot. And so we invited BED to come and join that meeting, and it's worked out very well. Now we're in conversation with the private business owner to them remove the camp off their property. So these are the ways that we're like working together in real time constantly through these warmer months. And I think that that's work that's not visible all the time to the broader community, but it's critical in our response.
Thank you. I have
Yeah.
a couple more questions, but I want to.
I think-
This question.
Did you have a presentation that you wanted to give that we haven't even let you start?
I think just broad strokes is.
Yeah. So, no, that's okay. I asked if there were questions as a starting point and there wasn't. So I was like, okay, we'll just go and feel it out. I did want to present, some data. These are the slides, that were actually shared with the Chittenden County Homeless Alliance this morning. That is our local decision-making body, for the entire county. And we track data on a monthly basis, of households that are, enrolled in our coordinated entry system, which is how we have a master list, for Chittenden County, which is, everyone who's enrolled in our system receives a common assessment and is connected to case management services. And we track this data on a monthly basis. We also use other sources, which I can talk about a little bit more, but, this month, or for the month of July, because we're a month behind in our reporting, there were 734 households in Chittenden County that were enrolled in coordinated entry. Of those, we had 76 families, we had 23 veterans, and 45 youth households, youth is transitional age youth. So that's between the ages of 18 and 24. And then we also began just recently tracking, because we've seen a spike in older Vermonters, it's age 62 plus. So we just started tracking that, and we have 73 62 plus individuals who are homeless in Chittenden County right now as well. Just to give you a idea, that is a 100% increase from 2023. We're doing a little bit deeper dive into that data. Like, did a bunch of people just sort of like age into 62? Like, are they just barely 62? Or are we like, we need to kind of break down that population a little bit more, because we've seen that has been our largest growing population in Chittenden County is older Vermonters. We also track, I'm just gonna go down here. We also track the number of households that we house. You guys can't see this, but it's not very clear, but we track this doing a 12-month look back. And the spots where we see, the biggest spikes directly coincide with the opening of new affordable housing units with homeless dedicated units. So what that tells us is something that's kind of obvious, but at least from a data perspective, the impact of new affordable housing directly correlates to more people being able to exit homelessness. So that's why we talk a lot about the importance of affordable housing. Oh, you zoomed right in there. So we also we recognize that oftentimes people who are unsheltered, and when we say unsheltered, we mean people who are camping or sleeping in a car or rough sleeping, which means that people are sleeping just on the ground without even the soft side of a tent. Oftentimes they are a lot harder to connect to our system because they're focused on where am I going to eat? Where am I going to sleep? Where am I going to shower? What is my stuff going to get stolen? How am I going to get my ID? Like the real, just like basics of life, and survival. And so we recognize that this coordinated entry data is not entirely all-encompassing of our unsheltered population. So we pull data from our community resource center that's operated by CVOEO on a monthly basis and track that. And they ask people as they come in, where did you sleep last night? And so they do that over the course of, a 30-day period. And then they report out to us. And last month, there was 267 people who self-reported that they were sleeping unsheltered. That's primarily all of this data is Chittenden County that I just shared with you. That's going to be data that's primarily in Burlington because people need to usually be in like walking distance of the food shelf in order to get their meals and that kind of thing. So those are the two main kind of data sets that we look like, and that's what the sort of broader picture of homelessness looks like. Are there questions about the data or how we track that or anything? Yeah.
I was at a discussion last night and people were talking about homelessness, and somebody said that the majority of people in the area are from the area. And I just wanted to, again, there were no experts there, so I just was more curious from your information. Is it people, because I think there's this feeling that people say, oh, they've come here because Burlington offers everything, as opposed to that they're, oh my God. It's more local as a percentage than it is somebody from somewhere else.
Absolutely. So I'm really glad that you brought that up because a lot of what we try to do, with the Homeless Alliance and with the city is like this myth busting piece around like people coming. So we hear all the time, like people are coming from out of state. There's so many, services. Reality is like Vermont actually has no housing. We have no capacity. So people are not coming here and getting things. So that if we had abundance of affordable housing, we would not be in the homeless situation that we have. So that's absolutely not true. We see small percentage of folks who migrate to different parts of the state. The main reasons why we see people migrate to Vermont, which is a very low percentage. There was the Agency of Human Services actually did a project in 2024, I think, where they inventoried and asked the households that were in the motel programs across the state where they lived before they were in the motel, and they actually found that it was 3.7% of the participants in the motel program actually came from out of state. So that's hard data. And then of course we'll have somebody who says like, well, I just talked to a guy who said he's from Tennessee, and I'm like, oh well, I think that there's that like anecdotal piece that sometimes like combats, but our data tells us that these are Vermonters. We're not people who are coming from out of state. The main reasons why people why we see people come from out of state. The first one is that they have ties to Vermont, that they grew up here, that they have family here. Maybe they were living with, a parent who passed away in, New York, and their brother lives here, and they come to stay with their brother and stay with their brother for a few weeks, and then something happens, or the brother has subsidized housing and was like, I actually can't stay here. And then the person is outside. And so we see that happen really, really frequently. We see people who migrate between states across the country because they are fleeing domestic or sexual violence, or stalking, relationship violence, interpersonal violence of some kind, which is legitimate. That happens across the country. And then we also saw, which was something that I really wanted to kind of peel back a little bit more, but we also saw migration around the change in federal administration, when some more conservative states were reducing or eliminating protections for trans students in schools, for example. Parents were migrating out of state because they were concerned about their children's health and mental health, and their ability to thrive in schools across the country that were eliminating resources that their kids needed. So we did, and we still continue to see, and that's not exclusive to homelessness per se, but from a just sort of global standpoint, we do see migration from other states, and it is a direct impact of shifts in values at the federal level. So thank you for asking that question.
Right. Any?
Hi, I'm Bram Klepner. Do you have data on people moving within the state? Because we also hear that people are coming to Chittenden County, coming to Burlington from other parts of Vermont. The same narrative.
Yeah.
We have all the stuff and no one else does. And I wonder if there's data.
That is a great question. So typically the reason why people move from county to county, so it's not Burlington specific. Again, we only measure data on a county level. The main reason, the number one reason far and away why we see migration of folks between counties is due to the limiting capacity of the motel program. So if you are in Chittenden County and the only motel room available to you is in Rutland, Economic Services is going to send you to Rutland. So we don't have control over that. And the really kind of disappointing piece is that for a very long time, I don't want to speak out of turn, but possibly still to this day, I don't know if the practice has changed. The state doesn't actually track where they even send people. So that's a state. So I would encourage you to ask that question at the state level, because it remains really challenging for us to get that kind of statewide data. What I will say is that we have entered into in, I think it was 2021 or 2022 maybe, a statewide data sharing agreement. So just as we utilize a shared database across all counties in the state, it's called the Homeless Management Information System. So we're able to pick up where another county has left off in service provision. But we don't see, I'm thinking about my experience with people. I almost never hear from people coming from other places in the state. Most of the people that I talk to they're from Burlington, they're from Chittenden County, and this is where they continue to reside. So
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Behind you.
My name is Farid. I'm a volunteer with the People's Kitchen. We serve at City Hall Park 3 nights a week, so it's been going on for a year now.
Farid, do you want to use a mic
sorry.
so that people online can hear?
So our team of volunteers have been serving dinner late at night to folks downtown, not exclusively, but largely to the unhoused population. So we actually happy to share the data that we have. Like you can see the increase, and when the motel program ended, it just actually tripled, like not just double, tripled the number of people. And we are seeing people in wheelchairs, like a more diverse set of folks that are now sleeping on the streets. And And one thing that's in common, like when I speak to them, I mean, this is anecdotal, but it's very noticeable, is that they were, and those were our parents, all have their kids taken away by DCF, but they themselves actually were a product of like the system. They came up through the DCF system, and it's just generational. So that when I hear that, it's, what are we doing? So that's what it is. And they're like, and I think like, I haven't met anybody who's like totally from out of state and just came here for like the benefits. I don't know what it is. Now, people came to Burlington, like from other part of Vermont, like maybe a couple of them, but mostly like people who were like even born here in Burlington and like have not been able to escape this situation. So, and now their kids are dealing with it. So yeah, so I want to share that, but we do also keep the data. Like we have a year's worth of data of like people who got our who were served downtown.
I would love.
Okay.
No, I didn't know. I mean, I know I've seen you when I'm driving the bus around. When it's 20 below zero, these guys are out giving it to people, which is amazing. I didn't know that you collected data.
Have not missed like a serving. That's one of the things that we like, because like we're the few reliable things in their life, so we really like try to be there for them. So
Love to
okay,
talk
yeah,
about that. And I also appreciate two things that you brought up. One is that we're seeing an increasing population that has significant chronic health needs. And so when we actually just looked at our data this morning and found that of our unsheltered population, they're overwhelmingly the majority, like I think it was like over 80% of the people who are unsheltered have a chronic health issue. So we're seeing really unwell people who don't have access to primary care or substance use supports or mental health supports. They're in wheelchairs, just like you said. The last round of exits from the motel included an incredibly medically vulnerable population. And we had to, work with our outreach providers are, working to try to secure like rechargeable batteries so that people can run oxygen and CPAP machines out of tents. Those are real things. We had somebody who is a double amputee in a wheelchair, and part of his physical therapy plan was to learn how to maneuver himself from the ground in his tent into his wheelchair. I don't say that for virtue signaling or anything, but like these are what you're saying is like that is the truth, that this is a very unwell population that, in my opinion, our system has completely failed. So I appreciate you for bringing that up. The other piece that's so critical that you said is the generational nature of this. So we know that when children experience homelessness, they are 5 times more likely to experience homelessness as adults. And we see that with an increasing that transitional youth age. A lot of times kids exiting foster care at 18 years old don't have, access to post-secondary education, have a lower earning potential, don't have natural family supports, like their moms aren't buying them mini fridges for dorm rooms that they don't have, like these things that we all are a part of, our lives that, this younger generation of kids that has grown up, been born into and grown up in homeless shelters. The impact of that trauma that you bring up is absolutely a component of why we're seeing these increased numbers today.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah.
We're going to move on to the next subject.
Yes, we have
I can quickly attest to that. I used to work at the downtown core by the transit center, and the amount of folks that I interacted with who are going through a very difficult situation is incredible. It just breaks my heart, literally.
And I would just like to say, from a city standpoint, and, I've only been in this position now 6 months, but, Burlington has built a lot of, shelters, increased our capacity over the last 5 years to handle this crisis. But we are the ones in Chittenden County that are doing the heavy lifting. And we really need our partners throughout the state, throughout the county, to help with this crisis. You know, there's only so much space in this city, you know, and, you know, CHT is building another spot, and we've opened other shelters over the last couple of years, but we can't do this alone as residents, as taxpayers. You know, this is something that, you know, we're going to have to rely on other towns and other partners to be able to handle this crisis. Yeah, so I think it's really important to point that out, that Burlington has done its, you know, a lot of its fair share with regards to this crisis. You know, Sarah is a staff here in the city, unlike in other towns. You know, we have her, you know, as a full-time employee dealing with this crisis. And that's how responsive Burlington has been. But we need our partners to step up in the state to help us also. So
I think that I want to just dovetail on that, because I think that we do talk a lot about that. I know we're going over time, but this is important, is because homelessness is something that you respond to. So if you don't have homelessness in your community, you can't respond to it. So I want to respectfully disagree with you a little bit on that. Counselor's thing, but I also think that we need to look for opportunity. Like, we can't, Jericho is not going to stand up a shelter.
Yeah.
You know, like, that's not something that's going to happen, you know, but how can, I would really love for us, and I challenge our city councilors to, how are we connecting with other towns? Like, what are the ways they can support us? Is it advocacy? Is there some sign on where, like, we make very specific, which we are planning to do, very specific asks to Governor Scott, and we say to the other select boards in these other towns, like, Burlington's doing a lot. We know we are. These are the things that we need, and we need you to help us advocate for those things. And so I think it's like, making sure that the ask to our surrounding communities is something that they can do. Like, we can't ask Underhill, Jericho, Richmond, Huntington to open homeless shelters. And if we say that, it even sounds sort of silly, but what we can do is think about the ways that they can, like, that they can stand with us in this as a region. So
yeah, and I would speak to, you know, with affordable housing, you know, every town has to put some sort of resources towards affordable housing.
Agree.
And so what I'm speaking more to is, how as a region can that funding be the same sort of mechanism?
Yeah, agree.
As we've done with affordable housing. Every town has to have, you know, a certain amount of affordable housing. We've made that. I think Councilor Carpenter brought that up at a recent meeting, and that this crisis demands the same sort of commitment. I'm not saying that they are open, you know, whether they open the shelters or not, but whether it's a financial or resource commitment to deal with this crisis. And I think that's.
Yeah, and other towns, I think, I live in Charlotte, and there is no affordable housing in Charlotte.
Yeah.
And anytime anybody tries to build anything on less than 5 or 10 acres, it's shut down immediately. So, like, what you're saying is true, is like, how are other towns stepping up, and what's the realistic ask that we can expect from other towns to, you know, to play that role? So
Thank you, Sarah.
thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry for running over.
No worries. No worries at all. Thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to the next topic, and we have our House representatives here. We're going to be discussing issues including relating to education funding. Representatives Pram Klepner, I hope I'm not butchering your name.
Not at all. Perfect.
And Mary Catherine Stone are here, so take it away, guys.
Thanks for having us, first of all.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm 8 months pregnant, so this will probably be the last meeting that I'm able to attend, but thank you.
Yeah, and you know, let me just start with the previous topic, and I will make an effort to keep anger out of my voice. But the legislature passed legislation to keep the people who were housed in the hotel motel program housed. And the administration vetoed that legislation, claiming it was about the money, but turned around and offered more money and a stupid plan, which was utterly unworkable. the legislature's
Tell us
plan.
what you really think, Bram.
We should also preface, though, the bill's number is H91, so if you want to look into what the bill was before it was vetoed, you can still look it up online. But the legislature went to great lengths to work with the administration to craft this bill so that it wasn't something that would blindside them or whatever. So we really did not see this veto coming because people from Governor Scott's administration were literally sitting around the table saying, yep, looks great, love it, stamp of approval. So this is not something that was even on our radar as something that was going to be vetoed, which made it even more like soul crushing to see happen.
And it's reprehensible that double amputees and veterans and children were put out on the streets on April 1st when it is cold and snowy in Vermont. And there's the children in particular whose school years were disrupted. It was barbaric. So we'll move on to education.
We'll move on to education.
We're still fighting and we're really upset and taken aback that happened. And I think it's still worth reaching out to the governor, if you haven't already, and just say, why did you veto this, especially after your administration sat around the table, nodded their heads and gave a stamp of approval to the bill. So
Could you say the bill number again?
H91. It's burned in my brain. I think about it every day, pretty much. Okay, so another glorious topic, the education bill. Do you want me to?
Sure, the education bill, which Tiff, who apologizes for not being able to be here, and Mary Catherine and I and most of the Burlington delegation voted against. And for various reasons. And I'll say the reason that I voted against it, I mean, the community was clearly opposed. And, I got 126 emails on this issue, one encouraging me to vote for the bill and 125 asking me to oppose the bill. So it was pretty clear, and they came from all corners. There were people, teachers and principals and superintendents. There were people who had graduated from Burlington schools and people with kids in the Burlington schools, and people who were just concerned citizens. My general view of the education bill is that there were a lot of people who felt that our school system needed to change, that we had lost, the school age population had declined over the last 40 years from something like 120,000 students to 80,000 students. So 40,000 fewer students than we had 40 years ago. Average school size in Vermont's about 400. So that's 100 schools, the equivalent of 100 schools being completely emptied out. And yet they're all still there and they're all still staffed and we are spending money on all of them. So there were absolutely some real issues with the education system that, for all the reasons change is hard, were hard to change. And with the governor leading on this, they use the property tax crisis as a vehicle to address some of these other issues, and some of them needed to be addressed. There were some other agendas, but I think we were fairly successful in managing those. So I voted against it for two reasons. One is that was really the process, that this bill came out of conference committee on a Friday afternoon, and we were asked to vote on it on a Monday morning, and our constituents had 0 work days to read the 156-page bill, to understand its implications, to do any analysis, to make any suggestions, for us to offer, there was no time. So the process was not at all one that I think led to the best result. The other reason was that this had been sparked and initiated by a property tax crisis, and it transforms everything in the system except it doesn't deal with property taxes. So the bill passed by fairly large margins. in both houses, and the governor signed it. And I think it's a bill that comes into effect over a number of years, so there is time. They left a number of blanks to be filled in. So how those blanks get filled in will have a meaningful effect on how good or bad the effect on the education system and the quality of education, the experience that our students have going to school, the cost that property taxpayers bear. There's a wide range of outcomes, even with the bill already passed, in terms of filling in the blanks and the ability to fix or not fix some of the things in the bill. So much work to be done.
Yeah. Okay, so the positive of this is that I sat on House Education Committee my first biennium. This is my second term, and I was waving all kinds of flags, felt like we were rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. And yes, we have a lot of other crises at hand. We have a healthcare system that's imploding. I know that because I'm a healthcare worker myself. We have a housing crisis. Just heard about it. We have all these things happening, but I was like, our public education system is at real risk here in Vermont, and we need to do something about it. And people were like, yeah. And this year they're like, oh my gosh, there's a crisis with our public education system. And I was like, okay, well, at least we're acknowledging it, right? But yeah, the process by which we have acknowledged it has not been so great. So we began the session with a commitment to bring down property taxes. We all know, we all got our property tax bills. They went up astronomically. Mine did, at least. Or some people went down. Good for you. Mine went up a little bit. And throughout the state, a lot of other communities are really rightfully hurting and complaining about it. We ended the session, though, with a bill that will require top-down consolidation into much larger school districts, a new funding formula to replace a funding formula that is still mid-implementation right now. And it enables eliminating local school district budget votes, and it changes how private schools receive public funds. But like Bram said, the bill puts many of these bigger decisions, including some of the most contentious things, until next year and beyond. So given the conflict that we had this year, and given the bill kicks a lot of those hard decisions down the road, it's very likely this next year will be even more contentious than the year we just had. There's no evidence, like you said, pretty much, that this will ease property tax burdens overall. And the funding formula can't and will not work without much bigger districts. And we can't even begin to understand, this is one of the reasons that I voted no, can't even begin to understand the fiscal impacts until those new districts are created. So those districts would need to be much bigger. And when I say much bigger, I'm talking 4,000 to 8,000 students in order to make the funding formula work as intended. And that scale may be really hard to achieve because we've seen other transformations like Act 46 and Act 173 have ground out in times past because of this. And there's also an inability to address differences about school vouchers. So I just felt like we're committing our school districts who are already struggling right now to years of chaos, right, as the federal government is also attacking public education. And along the way, I felt like we have lost the trust of many Vermonters. I received close to 150 emails from y'all, so thank you for your public engagement. I didn't have a single one telling me to vote yes. And in addition to all of the emails from my constituents, other groups who asked us to vote no on the bill included democratically elected members of the Vermont School Boards Association, the Vermont Superintendents Association, the Vermont Principals Association, and most importantly, y'all. So we lost this round, but the good thing, like I said, is people are focused on education right now. And we have pushed the legislature to address the big cost drivers of education, and we'll continue to do so. And this bill takes time to roll out. So that's what we're going to push for this year is while they're figuring things out, we're going to be pushing for more systemic, sustainable change. And ultimately continue to do everything we can to support our public schools and the kids who are educated in them. Working on affordability in healthcare, addressing the cost shift of the education fund on social services, special education, and so much more. So I have more detailed examples of like what's in the bill, potential problems, some successes, but that's a high level overview.
All right, any questions?
So just kind of a preliminary question as we try to understand what you just said. So the people who voted for this bill, why did they vote for, like, what was the nature of the support for this bill? What did people think the good would be that would come out of it?
I think it really depends on where you live in the state. And I think a lot of it was from this feeling. Again, this is like, I have no idea because I'm not in those people's bodies and minds, but this feeling of desperation to do something now. And when you have people saying, I can barely make ends meet, I can barely pay my bills, my property taxes are through the roof, can you do something? There's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of pressure. And these are really complex issues. I mean, the education system, my gosh, I was sitting in that room for, 2 years and still I'm like, our funding formula and the way that we do education in Vermont is so complex, especially to be such a small state. So I also think there's like a lack of education, for better words, of like the system. And so if you're sold something that's like, this will work, this will save money, you're like, okay, I only have 24 hours to read through this bill. And like, you're just going on good faith. And there's like a great feeling of desperation.
Daniel Webster apparently once said that a strong conviction that something must be done is the parent of many a bad measure. And I'm afraid that was true. What I heard, so what this bill does is it will provide more money to districts that are low spending districts. And, I think some of the people who voted for said, particularly like Teddy from Barry, said, this is the only way I can get more money to my kids. And it's going to meaningfully improve the education that the kids in Barry get. So there was some of that. There was, I think, as Mary Catherine said, the way we previously funded, the way we're funding education now, is impossibly complicated and unique in all the world. And the result of many a good intentioned effort to try to make the education levels equal across the state, substantial equality of educational opportunity, I think, Supreme Court's requirement of us. So an effort to do that and an effort to make the how we pay for it more fair across the state. But it has, as I said, become impossibly complicated and impossible for almost anyone to understand. Someone told me that there are maybe 3 people in the state who fully understand education financing. And
true.
None of them are in this room right now, I should just say, in spite of studying it. So the fact that it does simplify that, meaningfully simplify how that works, I think was also attractive to people. The governor's pitch was that by increasing class size, we will improve educational quality and reduce costs. And the improve educational quality part, there is absolutely something. We heard from teachers who said, when I have 6 kids in the classroom, yes, they get lots of individual attention. And if I have a group activity that I need 4 groups of 4, I can't do that. And often these 6 kids were also the only 6 kids last year. They all know each other. So the learning they get from being with different peers and with a larger peer group and dynamic classroom conversations isn't happening. So I tend to be willing to believe that there is some improved educational quality that can happen from increased class size and certainly the savings. We have, I think, the highest teacher to student ratio in the country. And that's expensive. So I think to answer, I mean, it's a long answer to your question. I apologize for that, but I think there are likely to be some improvements in education. There are likely to be some cost containment. I will say, I started off by saying we didn't deal with property taxes. And, the governor and the proponents of this became more and more careful not to say that this is going to reduce property taxes. They became more and more careful to talk about, we're going to stabilize it, we're going to reduce the rate of increase, all these things.
Yeah. And it also is because the joint fiscal office, when some people like, me and others were like, can we see the data? Can we actually see the modeling before I vote on this? The joint fiscal office wrote a fiscal note and declined to say that the bill would lead to lower taxes. Like they didn't even feel comfortable coming out with a statement.
I have a question. Was this voted for party line?
Yeah, well, it was a weird voting process.
Yeah, here's the thing,
Yeah, the voice vote, so we don't know.
Because it got voted in both houses, but.
Ours was a voice vote though, so it'd be literally like in this room, but pretending there are 150 of us and being like, how many eyes did I just hear with my ears?
Yeah, and it was an inexplicably odd vote. At the point where someone, the speaker said, "Are you ready to vote?" Where someone normally would have stood up and said, "I think this is an awful bill," or "I think this is a great bill," and normally would have said, "I'd like to call for a roll call."
So we would know how many, if it was on party lines.
It was just
who
a sort of
voted what.
stunned silence, and then there was a vote, and then it was over, and it was
Weird.
It
To the
was,
point where I called Bram before tonight, I was like, I'm 99.9% sure you voted no on this, but. No, just we go in the room and I start talking about how.
So, but it passed. I mean, the voice vote was fairly decisive in the House, which suggests it was a pretty tripartisanly supported vote.
We have two more questions, I believe. Go ahead.
Eric Galveston from Clymer Street. What is the mechanism that this bill uses to propose new school districts or consolidate school districts?
Talk about that, or you can.
Please.
So the redistricting process is being led by a task force, and the task force has 6 politicians and 5 appointed non-legislators who will recommend both new district maps and new configurations. And they've already started meeting. They had their second meeting last week. And one of the big issues that they're already coming across is that the Agency of Education has not been able to provide meaningful data that they need for decision making. And one of those reasons is because our AOE is severely understaffed. But those are the people who are supposed to be in charge of drawing up these maps and then presenting them to the legislature next year to start discussions.
December 15th, I think.
Yeah, so when we gavel in, theoretically, they're supposed to have this done, but like I said, they've already met twice and they still can't get the data that they need to even begin the conversation. So stay tuned, we'll see. There've been some pretty enlightening articles that have come from the meetings they've had thus far, like 7 days, Digger covered them. And we've assigned them I don't want to say impossible task, but it will be a miracle if they could pull it off.
They are meant to, the law calls for them to present 3 possible maps on December 15th. And it doesn't specify how many school districts there should be. The governor's plan calls for 5. They call, as Mary Catherine said, for school districts of at least 4,000 students, 80,000 students, that's 20 at least. So my guess is it'll be between 5 and 20, but unknown. And it's, as Mary Catherine said, it's a complicated process. And they are supposed to try to get sizes and grand list values sort of as similar as possible, and ensure that no kid has to go an hour and a half on the bus to get to
Transportation.
school. And, within these larger districts, there are going to be a number of existing districts that have different levels of debt, and there's
A need,
currently no plan on how you manage that, and different
CTEs.
contracts with teachers and
Yep.
all sorts of things. So there are a lot of complicated mechanistic pieces that have to get worked out. And September, here we are.
The House has good representatives
November,
on
December.
the redistricting committee, including the chair, there are two chairs of the redistricting committee. One is our very own Senator Martine LaRock Gulick, who's great. She has background as an educator. She's been on the on the Senate Education Committee last session, and she's on Finance Committee this session in the Senate. So she's great. And then
Been on the Burlington School Board.
and she's still on
Or
the
is on.
Burlington School Board. And then Representative Edie Granning is the co-chair. And Representative Edie Granning is chair of the Mount Mansfield School District, and also the vice chair of the House Committee on Commerce. So she's able to bring information about CTEs into the conversation. So we have some good representatives on there, but even still, it's going to be a big lift for them. And I don't envy that position.
I'm excited to learn a lot more about this because I know very little. But one question I have is what's the potential impact for kids in the Burlington School District? And without knowing exactly what's going to happen, what are some examples of changes that would happen? If you have any.
The school consolidation piece seems unlikely to have a lot of effect here. Our schools are bigger, the classes are full. There's sort of, I've heard some people saying, boy, why did Winooski put all that money into their new school? Like, those kids could have just chosen between Burlington's very shiny new school and South Burlington. And they don't have Winooski's pretty small, and they could have done it without. I don't think Burlington kids are going to see a huge impact. What do you think?
The only thing is, again, we couldn't get modeling on this, is that a lot, what the governor proposed and what made into the bill assumed that we were going to stop freezing. We were going to put a freeze on what's coming out of the ed fund. So starving the beast. And I mean, y'all know from watching the news too, what's going on federally, Trump is cutting stuff left and right. And so if we're freezing what's going on in the ed fund and not taking that into account, that's setting us up for some real potentially scary situations when it comes to how we fund special education. I'll say that as an occupational therapist, that I had real big concerns about not having that data and putting the cart before the horse. So that would be an example of could potentially tamper with some of our most vulnerable students in the way that we provide them with funding, because a lot of that funding comes from federal and state level. If you're toying around with that stuff, that would impact our kids.
Thank you. All right, so we're gonna take one more question from the council, and then we're gonna move on.
What's the chances, and it's probably not, that this gets revisited again?
Oh, it will, for sure.
For this bill's a bad idea.
I mean, sorry, I'm talking so much. This is my passion is education. So I'm yeah, for sure. I mean, the fact that the redistricting task force is already coming up against so many hurdles, I have no idea, if they're going to even be able to get a report together by December 15th. And if they do, it's going to be missing a lot of stuff, and not for lack of trying.
And why not just deal with the funding piece? Why are we doing?
That's a tricky slope to be. You can mess around with numbers and stuff, but at the heart of it, if you're not addressing numbers,
The drivers of.
the cost drivers of education and school governance and the things that the numbers are actually impacting children, students, or teachers, then it's all in vain. We're just trying to fill a bucket that has 80 holes in it.
I will say that not the biggest cost component of education, but the fastest growing component is healthcare costs for all the people working in the educational system. And I have heard, and I think he was right on this, the governor's sense was that we didn't have the bandwidth to tackle education and healthcare in the same session. And as I say, I think his sense that we would have blown a gasket is probably accurate. And I don't know whether we'll tackle it this coming year or not, or whether there's going to be an initiative from the administration to try to deal with healthcare. But healthcare and housing, like any problem you have, if you follow it far enough, you will get to either healthcare or housing.
Yep.
I think we did good work on housing this year, made it easier to build, and we're going to keep working on that. And we do have to address healthcare if we want to deal with the education costs and small business and the people losing healthcare because of the federal cuts and all those things.
Right. Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
Wait for both of you.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to the next subject, Burlington School District updates with Commissioner Claire Wool.
Hi.
Hello. Good, how are you?
Hi.
Hello. Thank you, Bram. So I am here, was asked to come to give an update on the education bill, which I think they did a great job. And if there were any questions that people had, I can talk about our district overall, because I haven't been here for a little bit. But you tell me as the steering committee, that'd be good? Okay, great. Thanks. So my name is Claire Wool. I'm chair of the Burlington School Board. I am fortunate to be serving. This is my 8th year. We have 12 members of the school board. Myself and Jeff Wick also represents our combined district of Ward 5 and 6. And we are starting up the school year with a tremendous amount of optimism and excitement. We have fully staffed schools, our admin teams. The consistency has been fantastic in our schools for leadership. And we had last week, I'll start at the elementary level, as our state representative shared, we are somewhat of an anomaly in the state. Our enrollment is strong. We have schools that are at capacity, and we have wiggle room at some schools, but we see continually families coming into the city of Burlington and enrolling students in our public schools, and we're grateful for that. Currently at the elementary level, we had an unveiling of our Integrated Arts Academy, the former H.O. Wheeler School, the Old North End, because over the past year, we had displaced that entire school community and moved them down to St. Mark's in a facility that we used as their school, our elementary school, and also Sarah Holbrook Center, as it had closed, and we were able to use that space for grades. What was done at that school was a $17 million renovation. 10 million of those dollars were ESSER funds that are elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds from the federal government. And we had budgeted this way back in our capital campaign from 2017, where we identified and along with the city, there was an audit of all of our facilities and structures and what was needed for improvement. And as they say, for every dollar spent in improvement, you're saving $11 in repairs. And for a 1904 building, it had a lot of needs of leaking and failed systems, heating systems. And we were so grateful for our IAA community that they were able to put their young little 5-year-olds on buses and work with us in that transition, because we needed We needed the campus to be completely empty. So that being said, on budget, on time, and the unveiling happened last week, and we started school last Tuesday, and just an incredibly successful project overall through the leadership and our community partners that were a part of that. Our other elementary schools, Flynn Elementary, again, we did other facility upgrades throughout the city because it's not just isolated to IAA and our BHS BTC campus. We did some mechanical work at Champlain and some roof work, Flynn's paving, parking lots, upgraded countertops, things like that in nature. But again, investments in our public schools. Middle schools, we have new railings in our Edmonds campus because we had, even though they were all to code, we put in some precautionary better railing and other, again, upgrades throughout. The Edmonds campus and Hunt campus had seen considerable upgrades over the last 2 summers. And then our high school, you might have seen on the news last week, they did cover that this was our last year at Macy's. We have been paying over $1.2 million in rent to the owners of Macy's. Unlike any other school district in the state of Vermont, we are using academic dollars for rent because our high school and tech center was closed due to PCP contamination and based on the thresholds of the state. And therefore, we are going to be very happy not to have to use those academic dollars in rent. And our students have I have 3 children, 2 graduated from Macy's, and we feel very fortunate that our faculty and staff and our community has rallied behind being educated at Macy's, and it has been a great experience and a learning experience. And so that was the press, and we are excited that that is our goal. We are on time and on budget so far for our BHS BTC campus on Institute Road, with the projected enrollment beginning next September, where students will come in. We will hopefully have occupancy by April and begin the move over the course of 4 to 5 months. Currently, right now, we are not offering any tours. We are including faculty and staff and city officials to come and see our progress once a month. And that has provided, an overview for people to see the magnitude of the work that's been done on the site. And we're extremely excited with the progress that Whiting Turner, our construction company, and all of our participants throughout the state of Vermont that are making that goal a reality. So incredible gratitude. High school. Again, Burlington Technical Center has also been displaced and is in 3 different locations. And so they will be included on campus. And then another highlight is our Eagle Bay Academy. We renamed this a year ago. This is our alternative high school known as Horizons and On Top. And we had that in the old campus, and they had been at St. Mark's. So when we were able to move them to Rock Point, we have a long standing lease to be able to utilize the Rock Point, and we did some upgrades to that facilities to make it accessible to all our students. So they are being housed at the old, not old, it's now new or renovated retreat center out at Rock Point, an incredibly therapeutic and positively inspiring learning campus that is of great need and provides incredible opportunity for our students that require alternative high schools here in this, and to be able to stay within their city to receive those services and that education. And that is in sort of overview of all of our schools. And we are fortunate that each of our elementary schools has a pre-K program. in the past, the pre-K program was only in a few. Many years ago, there was talk of creating a pre-K center. When we got on the board, we thought that wasn't a great idea, and we actually voted it down because the goal ideally would be to have your pre-K students at your elementary school to learn and be with siblings as necessary. So we feel great that we had been able to add on some space to some of those elementary schools or work within the confines of that real estate, that property, to provide that for families. So that's a facilities update. And a financial update would be over the last 5 years, we worked incredibly hard as the Burlington School Board to reach out throughout the entire state to create a coalition to address the the archaic funding formula for education in the state of Vermont. The efforts over 5 years in working with researchers, Tammy Colby from UVM, also Rutgers, American Institute of Research. We developed, not us, we worked and learned through a report that was commissioned by the AOE about our funding here in the state of Vermont. And through that report in 2019, and through advocacy and data and modeling, we passed a bill 2 years ago, which was Act 127 to stand by what funding formula should be based on our 50 other states. There was no rhyme or reason to the Vermont funding. There was no empirical data, and it was not equitable. Students or districts with higher needs, either in urban or rural communities, were not receiving the funding necessary to educate those students, those high need students. And it is incredibly troubling that our governor announced when he brought in a consulting firm, APA, out of Denver, that all of us and the work over 5 years were just tinkering with numbers. And it is so far from the truth. It was actually proven, exampled, presented through report after report, and it's very disheartening. And it is finally, over the last 2 years, has been in effect, and we have benefited because of our high need students here in the city. And it's not just, like I said, also in rural communities, because in over years and years, we paid or we received the same amount of funding, and yet we needed more. And so we had to make tougher choices than other surrounding Chittenden County school districts that didn't have the needs that we had. So Act 127, in its infancy of just being, maybe 24 months in, now is being replaced with this new Act 73. I've got to get my Act 73, which is H454. And I'll tell you, it's upsetting because we asked over the course of the last 6 months for modeling, for data, show us an example how this will save Vermonters money. And our superintendent went down and spoke and represented through the Superintendent's Association, and nobody in the Senate or House Education Committee could show us any numbers. So it really is concerning. We are open to reform for sure. But when your Senate Education Committee chair is from Burton, and the conference committee is made up of another chair who represents St. Johnsbury Academy, it really felt like the representation, even on the state board level, it does not reflect our public schools population here in the state. And so that is of concern. We are, like I shared and our elected officials also shared, we have time to be able to communicate those concerns. I mean, there've already been ethics, violation of ethics, filed because of some of the conversations or the way this entire bill was presented. But we go back to the fundamentals, which is our governor presented a bill presented by a consultant company out of Denver, didn't work within the state. And there are so many incredible state educational leaders that want to support and improve our system. I also chaired last year a Vermont School Board Association task force made up of school board chairs and members throughout the entire state, where we asked and presented our elected officials and the governor to support our agency of education. This is a governor that left the Secretary of Education position and did little to no recruitment or investment of time in that state position. So and also on the state board, again, representation of public schools. A lot of private schools are represented, but not public. And so in that regard, it just felt disingenuous that to attack public schools that were the problem behind high taxes, given sort of the perfect storm of the past years of appraisal, reappraisal, real estate values, the grand list, and again, asking for data and information from the Agency of Education. It just didn't exist because more people were leaving the Agency of Education than were working at the Agency of Education. So we, in the task force, gave examples of how we should all support the state agency, how we should support the State Board of Ed, and make positive change and reform as needed in the overall public education here in the state. So many people are excited to lean in and improve systems, but Act 127 was an example of leaning in and doing the good work. And so we'll see over the next 2 years, one, like you shared, the redistricting committee, that is in action right now, and it's making districts between 4,000 and 8,000 students. Understandably, there will no longer be school boards in each school district. It'll be, you won't have local control. So there's so many things and it's all really spelled out online, all the things that that this bill encompasses. But we're open to this, but we are cautiously, optimistic because we feel like all of this work have been done, but now it's under the gun. I shouldn't use that. Now there's an urgency, but there's more urgency to just do something rather than do it right. And Act 127, we felt was an effective use of everyone's time and a successful passage of a good bill. So I'm trying to think of other things that I had. Class size minimums, like you shared, really, it's not a lot of the things that they want to correct. Burlington is, we don't have a lot of those issues because, but things like class size minimums, a statewide calendar we asked for, graduation requirements, of course. And I don't think a lot of Vermonters knew that public money is being spent on private schools. There's a list of 18 private schools. So if you don't have a high school in the town you live in, you get to use your public dollars to go to a high school. And those high schools were setting their own tuitions, and we were paying whatever the tuitions were asked. And in that regard, reform should happen. And the same with religious schools. And so some of those reforms seem fair, and what else can I say? That was a lot. I didn't.
So we're going to open the floor for questions.
Yeah. I have just a really quick question, which is, I'm thinking about these districts of maybe 4,000 students. So how many students does Burlington School District have right now? Just to get a sense of like how that compares.
We have 3,500.
Okay.
Between 35, we always go between 3 and 4. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bob Whitey again. I went I'm a baby boomer that my class size was 1050. So
Yeah.
big schools are okay. Our school teachers were paid better. You're right.
Yeah.
Fewer administrators. But there's a new documentary that's out. I don't know if you've seen it. Gone Guys, the documentary funded by the Tarrant organization that tackles the quiet crisis facing boys and young men in Vermont. Our son, two of his really good friends at BHS committed suicide. It's a real problem. It would be fun to address some real problem as opposed to these. Yeah. Well, we have a problem with boys. It doesn't mean that we don't need this support system for girls. It just means the boys need a support system too.
Well said, yes, yeah.
I have a question regarding public transit, transit availability for students.
Yes.
That's what I heard.
Now that they're moving away from the downtown area, they're going to be moving away from it. What are some of the things that the school districts? Yes, and with in the collaboration with GMT that the school district is doing to provide students that may not have means to get between the school and their homes to provide them adequate transit. While I was working for GMT at the time, one of the things that I worked with BHS was to make sure that the kids get picked up bus number 9 and number 7 before I put them to school on time. And that worked a lot well, especially when we have the noon time at 3:15. So once now they move to, what they have is, I'm a little bit worried if they won't get a station service. Are you guys in contact with GMT at this point?
We are, we have a yearly contract with them.
Okay.
And yes, the way it worked in the past, and having a student that was at old BHS, we'll call it old BHS. We have a bus stop there. We're actually relocating the bus stop. Buses will be coming on campus. And yes, great question. And I appreciate your service in that role that you played very much. But yeah, transportation is always, right now, we need bus drivers more. Like we have 3 buses that we use for our vulnerable population, and we are not able to right now currently fill those positions. So we're working with some temporary staff, but yes, busing and GMT, hopefully with the future of GMT, they are going to still be in existence because we do not have a bus fleet. They use the city bus. City bus is for all our public students that aren't that don't require it currently right now.
Right. I think there's an arrangement between the school and GMT where
yes,
they write for not technically free.
Yes,
but
they show their school
amount that the
pass.
school pays.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Yep. Good question. Thanks. Thanks.
I wanted to thank you for bringing up a really important issue, which is that public dollars are going to private schools, and state a few things. So the governor's plan that he proposed in the beginning of the session was endorsed by the Koch brothers and Americans for Prosperity, which is a conservative leaning group, and they were praising him for the plan because it was actually supporting school choice, which is something that I have been combating, because I think if you receive public dollars, you should be playing by the same rules. So this bill, the governor actually proposed to limit payment of private schools where the majority, 51% of students were publicly funded, just saying like, we'll still give you money, but like 51% of the kids who go to your school should come from the public. And once it got into the Senate, on the Senate side, because of what you said, I believe, which is that the chair of the Senate Committee on Education is from, Burn Burton is a member, emeritus board member of that school now. They dropped the threshold to 25%. So public funds are still going to be going to private schools. They did surgically cut out the funding of religious schools, but again, headlines can be misleading. Those who are big proponents of the bill are saying like, oh, look at this work that we did. No more funding to religious schools, but there's still a lot of funding going to private schools. And the bill does not change the fact that private schools don't have to play by the same rules that public schools do.
So, and that means, so that in layman terms, there's no fiscal oversight. We don't have to, and they may have endowments, private endowments, sorry. So that's
So my question would be, do we know what that number is? How much is going to private schools?
Oh, we'd need student enrollment, but
We don't
like
know
you
how
said,
much dollars are going to.
It's the same data as public schools, so that's one of the problems.
Yeah, so we,
Private schools don't have to release the same information,
financials.
their
yeah,
financial
that's-
information.
but yeah,
Yeah.
What does the superintendent of St. Johnsbury Academy make a year?
Tell you what our verdict was.
Yeah, it's more than the governor made.
Yeah.
$500,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just to put it in perspective, where your money is going.
All right, any additional questions? Education support?
Yes, and I will say, I said something at the IAA opening, and I just wanted to share it here, which is, I don't want to be I am so positive. I am so lucky. I feel so great. We have the most amazing schools, and Burlingtonians and Burlington supports our schools immeasurably. And thank you to all the citizens here for supporting the bond. Again, that was something that we were shut down. No other school in the state was shut down for good. And in that regard, it was a need, not a want. And so thank you for your support. And also, because it falls on the shoulders of Burlingtonians, it does make Burlington unaffordable. So we talk about our state leadership saying, you've made Burlington's unaffordable, but yet you then make Burlingtonians pay for an entire new high school by themselves. And so we're one of 5 states in the US that doesn't have construction aid. Every other state, I grew up in Massachusetts, pays 40% construction aid for any facilities, upgrade, boiler, maintenance, new school needed, based on our, 1904 school, our Edmonds campus, or the historic markers. And so Vermont put a moratorium 14 years ago and said, we just can't pay for any school improvements. And we have testified and shared how this impacts our costs because of the need for upkeeping your home or your school. And so in that regard, investing in your school is investing in your community. So if you have good schools, that's where people want to live. And Burlingtonians have put that as a priority. So I can't thank you enough for asking financial questions. I'm a frugal New Englander, keeping us on track, giving us your concern. But people on fixed incomes there are structures in place to support them, but an average home in Burlington is incredibly expensive, and having to build a new high school and a tech center. Again, I look to the state. They did give us $16 million for environmental cleanup, but that was just to start on dirt. So we Burlingtonians have paid for this entire project. And that's a big accomplishment, and it's going to be an amazing thing, but you can't be in a college town without a high school. We have one high school, all of our schools, we have, 12 schools, and everything leads to BHS and BTC. So it really is going to show citizens the value we place on our next generation Vermonters who are growing up here. So thank you.
And can I say, that's an amazing staff that is there. Really. Got an amazing team at BHS.
Yeah,
And I can attest to that because I've worked with them, and
I know you have.
they're incredible people over there. So
Well, you lean in a lot, so I can't thank you enough. So
thank you, Kylie.
Thanks, everybody.
Without anything else, no more questions? Okay. All right, so if there's any objection at this point, we're gonna go ahead and adjourn the meeting. It is 8:15. I cannot see from here, but.
we have
Okay.
right on the dot. On the dot. What a tight meeting coming up. We have a meeting.
Yeah.
Years. They don't put on favorite on sheet.
Nice job.
I was just a citizen. Thank you so much. That was so.